Thank you all for being with us this morning. And we're going to jump into our next interview with two folks who I'm just so thrilled for you to meet. So I'm going to ask for Jeremy and Renee, we're going to turn on your videos so we can see you for a bit. And I'll welcome Jeremy, our interviewer. Hi, and then I'll let you say a bit about Renee. So Jeremy Warshaw is our interviewer today, and Renee Jones is our featured creative, our artist. Jeremy's creativity comes in many forms. I couldn't cover them all today, but one prominent one is his ability to draw out stories from others and then tell them in really compelling ways. He's a journalist that uses photography and storytelling and interviewing. And I have to say, what I would want you all to know about Jeremy is that he and Renee actually share a pretty critical trait, which is that they have curiosity about others, about what makes us human. And so they both have different lenses to share that. So I invite Jeremy to take it away.
Thank you. And hello to everyone out there. I'm on the East Coast, so I've been up and about, and I have to say from the outset, and if anyone can't hear me, obviously Katie will communicate that with me. It's all a bit hit and miss with this technique. I have to say that the challenge that Katie set me was, we want you to interview someone you don't know, get to know her story, and it's about her life and about her art and how her experience in her life has affected her art and what she's learned as she's grown older. And I said, how long do I have? And she said, you've got about 25 minutes, and then there'll be a few minutes for questions. So please understand that obviously all we can do in this limited time is just provide some snapshots of Renee's quite remarkable life and her artwork. And I thought the best way to start this process was to go through a kind of little potted history. Obviously, Renee will fill in all the information about certain events in her life that maybe give you a sense of her particular experience. And that will sort of enable you to look at her art, which we'll do the second half of this session, with a kind of more knowledgeable, informed mind about how her life has impacted the artwork that she's created, as opposed to just using images to tell her story, which is only part of her life. So let's just start with a little bit about Renee and her particular life. Maybe, Katie, you could put up the first image, which is coming up, which is going to give you quite a, there you go. Now, that's a great setup for Renee. If you could take it away and tell us just what your childhood was like, how you would describe it from your early days, obviously, up to when you left for college. Just give us a sense of the experience you had growing up in a large family.
Well, hello, Jeremy and everyone.
Yeah.
So, my life definitely has been unusual in that I was raised in a very large family with a single parent father as the head of household. I was born in Denver, Colorado, but we came to San Francisco when I was between 1 and 2 years old. So this photograph that's here is a photograph that was taken when somebody nominated my father as Father of the Year and gave us this piano. So the piano's sitting outside our house, and they hoisted us up on the piano and surrounding my father, and then they took the picture and it was in the local newspaper. So when we came out here to San Francisco, my mother came with us at first, but she didn't like San Francisco and she was having a lot of emotional problems. One, because she had been raising us by herself as my father went to seek work. And so she was, I guess, outdone by us or something. So went back she actually moved to Chicago. And at the time, she was pregnant with my youngest brother. And when she gave birth to my youngest brother, my father went back and got him. And so the reason why my father chose San Francisco was because he was a chef. And his claim to fame was that he was one of the cooks for Harry Truman when he would ride the train to visit dignitaries. And so he always likes to tell people that. So when we came out here, he was looking for work as a chef, and he was known as the Lobster Tail King of the Sunset District.
Can I jump in? Can I jump in, Renee? Because one thing that I think everyone should know, and you're so self-effacing that people won't get it because you're one of the most humble people I've met, is that you believed, even though you grew up in relatively, let's say, economically strapped situation, there was a tremendous amount of love in that family, and you didn't know that you were, technically speaking, poor. Am I right in saying that? That you had a good upbringing and let no one take that away from you?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't so much that I didn't know that we were poor, it's that it didn't matter as much because everyone around me, of course, my brothers and sisters, were, having the same experience. And there would be times in school when we would be given clothes, and there would be times when, we would be given food and stuff, but it didn't seem to impact me in the way, or I didn't experience it in the way that I would see on television. But I definitely knew we were poor, but that was just a word, and that was just, like it looked like something different than what other people experienced.
And that, I would think, because what we're trying to communicate in this session is a lot about not just aging, but about identity and how identity impacts your whole approach to life, including, in your case, your art. Would you say you were the 8th out of 10? So
Yes.
big family, and you were on the younger side.
Yes.
How did being number 8, or how did growing up in a family of 10 of you impact the way you saw treating other people? What lessons did you learn about a large family and your responsibilities to treating everyone equally?
Usually, like people have a certain place, especially when you have a nuclear family, then it seems as though the older children take on a certain spot, and the younger children are usually considered the baby and things like that. And I actually was considered the baby for a short time. I was my father's little girl, but at some point it got to where, because there wasn't this kind of nuclear family like mother and father and kids, then I sort of slipped out of that role. And the only place that I could actually fit was to become almost like the mother figure, even though I was on the younger end.
And I think you becoming the mother figure weighs heavily on some of the decisions you made later, which...
Oh, most definitely.
And please forgive me for jumping in. I'm just very conscious of Katie, our stern taskmaster, that we don't...
No worries.
Over. Think of me as the tour guide. Before growing up in the 60s and 70s, and probably you can go off that picture now, Katie, or stay on it. It's up to you, but we're not going to talk much about that. Would you say that growing up in the 60s and 70s, you experienced a lot of racism? You're obviously in the West Coast, and there must have been a heavy degree of protest going on. Tell me about your view of what you witnessed and experienced.
we definitely experienced a lot of racism, and even though we are on the West Coast, um, it was quite different. The way that we acquired the house that I grew up in was because a white man shot my sister in the face with a BB gun, and because she touched his car, which was blocking the sidewalk where she needed to walk. So, out of the the lawsuit that came from that, then we were able to acquire our house, even though my father could not purchase it. He had to have somebody else purchase it. Um, but the other ways that it was different was because uh, I grew up during the time when, women's lib was coming in, and, of course, the 60s, Black Power and all that stuff was very important. And to this day, it's why I personally use the term Black to describe myself as opposed to African American. And I know that that kind of drives white people crazy because they don't know which one to use, to be politically correct and everything. But yeah, I use that term because I feel like I earned it, like I fought for it and things like that, and I know what it means. So I think that when the women's lib movement came in, that was a little more difficult because they just assumed that Black women were the same as white women, and they just assumed that Black men were the same as white men. And so I had difficulty with how much Black men were being put down and how much white women were being called sister in such a way that it didn't feel like that.
So what is remarkable is that, as we're going to see, your photography is not protest photography, glib phrase though that is. It's very human, and there's tremendous empathy and sensitivity to the human condition, which leads me to ask you, when did you first get into photography? How did that present itself to you? And you said, oh, that's something I can really get into. I think I'm going to go with that.
Yeah, well, so when my father came here as a chef, he couldn't really afford to work as a chef because that required steady, specific hours, and he couldn't raise his children and not have a flexible schedule. So he became a handyman. So he would be cleaning people's basements and attics, and he would find all kinds of treasures. And, a lot of times we would go to the dumps with him and find all these treasures. And so a lot of times there would be cameras. So even though I didn't have film, I gravitated towards the camera because it allowed me a way of looking at everything, paying attention to everything at the same time as hiding and staying out of the way of my older brothers and sisters, or learning any and all of those things.
Well, what was it? But obviously it had its sort of protective device. You could get involved in something and get out of the presence of your difficult siblings. What was it that it empowered you to do that you said, this is touching a part of me that I find just fulfilling and rich? How did it make you become more Renee?
Well, it allowed me to realize that the world was being told things about my world were being told by other people. And I wanted not only my world, but the world of Black people, the world of Black women, the world of Black men to be told by somebody who's Black. I mean, a lot of times I would see these images, and of course, because I didn't have a mother, a lot of times it set me in such a way that I thought that's what I was supposed to do, or that's how I was supposed to be. And so um, the camera just allowed me to ask the questions of, whose eyes am I looking through when I take these pictures? And um, am I portraying Black people in the way I know them to be? So um, that was a lot of what photography did for me.
Great answer. Yes. Yeah. So when you went to college, which you paid for yourself and you worked through it, you went to San Francisco State and you studied primarily art therapy. Why did you choose art therapy?
I kind of stumbled into it because I was taking psychology, which seems like every girl just gravitates towards psychology. Um, and I, of course, loved art, but I, photography was a big thing then, and you couldn't get into photography classes unless you were a junior or a senior. So I would find classes in other departments under other headings. Like there was a photography class in the journalism, there was a photography class in the humanities department. And so there was this class that was titled The Impact of Photography on Third World Communities. So I took that class and I loved it. And I came to understand more things about the impact of photography, but also in taking psychology and classes that had to do with teaching young people and understanding young people, from the earliest age possible, how they could see themselves, how they could find themselves. And so uh, their selves. And so it was just because I wasn't able to get into the regular classes that I kind of stumbled into it.
Well, it served you well, as we're about to see. If we can fast forward to from college to a period, I think, in your 40s when you developed some quite serious medical issues. I think some cervical spinal issues.
Yes.
I don't know when you also got Graves' disease. And,
Yes.
so you're dealing with a bunch of challenges, to say the very least. And it got to such a stage that you couldn't work any further and you
Right.
went on to disability and you found yourself homeless. And without getting into too much of the details, can you just describe what you learned in the homeless process that may have in fact impacted your creativity, your view of the world, how that experience was for you? Because most of us are privileged enough not to have gone through that unbelievably wretched state. So what did you experience and how did it inform you going forward?
Well, first being homeless, I didn't realize how much I didn't get the opportunity to see nature when I was growing up. So when I was living in my car, of course, I was driving all over. And even though it was still in the city, it was, greenery and water. And, we have this ocean out here that I rarely went to, and the zoo and things like that. So I just realized how much is in my own backyard. And I also realized how um, people experience homelessness in so many different ways. And I totally love the creativity that, they say necessity being the mother of invention kind of thing. Um, but
You wouldn't recommend it, would you?
but it definitely, I found ways of empowering myself by um, realizing that just because somebody says that it's not there, something's not there, or or you can't have this or whatever, that doesn't mean that that's true. And so, I went on this journey of trying to figure out my own reality and figure out the explore fact and truth and things like that.
Right.
And so I just gave myself a bunch of assignments
Yes.
that would allow me to find things that you wouldn't think you could find in the city.
So for you, it was a creative opportunity born out of necessity.
Yeah.
Two more questions before we move on to your artwork. One is during this period of homelessness, and once you got out of that situation, it led to you changing the way you photograph. You'd become more sort of comfortable with determining, I'm going to determine what I capture and how I capture it. Can you talk to that? You talked about shooting people from the waist down, and you also wanted to capture the beauty of Black people from the perspective of a Black person who has far more insight, inevitably. Can you talk to that growing confidence?
Yeah, so I went for about 5 years where I said that I would not photograph anybody else other than a Black person or a person of color. And when I would be in a situation where I really wanted to take this photograph, but it wasn't a Black person, I would photograph them from the waist down or photograph them in such a way that you could not see or tell what race they were. And that made for some interesting photographs because a lot of times it might have been at, say, a parade or something like that. And so I would end up focusing in on the instrument, right? It might end up focusing in on the shoes or the, a particular outfit somebody was wearing. And that really, I was surprised at how much that opened me up to paying attention to how absolutely beautiful Black people are. And it's not that I didn't know it before, it's that there was such a variety and such a um, just a richness in everything that I found after that 5 year experiment or yeah. So
My last question is, you talked about what a Black person could bring to the photographic, or probably any creative format, when it's capturing the Black experience in a way that a white person couldn't. I mean, it makes sense, obviously, but could you define what you could bring to that process that maybe I couldn't? And I don't want to personalize it, but you understand where I'm going?
yes. Well, I think that even I'm more drawn to photograph things in a stereotypical way. But having worked to not do that has been, of course, a great thing. I don't know that white people look to do that, to not photograph things in a stereotypical way. And partly it's because they only know things in a stereotypical way. Even if they have close friends, even if they have family members, they still will know it in that stereotypical way. And I just found that people would more often than not just completely just add to. I don't know how to say it other than that.
That a white person's instinct, however well intentioned, is often to resort to the stereotype, to present people informed by movies, journalism,
Yes.
white journalism, and so forth. And so, Black people were not portrayed in all their humanity and all their richness as fully evolved humans, with, emotions that cover the gamut. So I'm sure that's right,
Yeah,
obviously.
yeah.
And they're the good ones with good intentions, not the ones with you know,
Right.
negative. Let's start with, there are going to be 5 pictures that we're going to see, and we'll whiz through them because I think Katie will be very angry if we don't. Let's start with the first image, which is brothers, which is magnificent. Talk to everyone about what's going on in this picture.
So these are my 2 nephews, and my sister made this canopy chair. She just liked the idea of that. And my youngest nephew was struggling because everybody was leaving his life. His older brother was gone away to school, and his mother was having some mental health issues, so she was sleeping a lot, and I was there watching her kids. And so when the older brother would come home, well, then the younger brother just had to be around him at every moment. So the older brother is eating cereal behind the curtain, and the younger brother just has to climb up in his lap and be with him. And so when I went to take a picture, he had to pull the curtain back to see what I was doing, of course.
What was so moving, I think you said the younger brother was, who was probably not fully articulate, but he said, brother gone.
Yes.
Which breaks your heart when you hear it. And it takes it out of the black, white, you know, sort of tribal difference into human, into a sort of, everybody can understand what's going on in this poor boy's mind.
Yeah.
And the humanity of it. And the light is astounding, that the black off to the side and the bright white behind the light. Just a magnificent picture, a special moment.
Thank you.
Let's move on to the next one, which by way of change, called camels. Tell us what your thinking was behind this one.
Well, so when I was telling you earlier about trying to figure out my reality, and just because somebody says that it's not there, that doesn't mean that you can't find it there. So I had been watching this thing on television about camel races in Las Vegas. And I just thought, I'd love to see some camels walking down a San Francisco street. So it took me 3 years to figure out how I could find them. And I didn't want to go to the zoo, of course, because they had to be walking down the street. And so I realized that for 70 years, the the circus comes to town. And in San Francisco, they come by train, and they have to take them off the train and walk them up to the arena, which is known as the Cow Palace. And so at this point, they're actually going back to the train, and you kind of can't make out the fact that there are people on the other side, but I took the photograph in a very specific way and in a very particular place that sort of just gives that casual walking around.
People should be aware that you were going through Graves' disease at the time, and
Yes.
you'd lost 89 pounds in 2 months.
Yes.
Which is incredible. And so this was a bit of a challenge for you to film or photograph something that would be difficult to accomplish. It was a sort of an empowering act. It wasn't just, oh, I love camels, I'm going to photograph them. It was your way of setting yourself a challenge.
Yeah.
You said, my medical side might be out of control, but I'm going to make sure that my artistic side is fully under my empowerment. Is that fair?
Very true. Yeah.
Gotcha. And by the way, I've just looked it up. They're not camels, they're what's called dromedaries.
Oh, yes. Well,
camels have 2 humps, dromedaries have 1.
I was just being casual, but yes.
Jeremy, this is Katie coming in with a time warning.
Oh,
with 1 minute left.
Okay.
Oh, lordy, lordy. You see, let's go to Shall We Dance, the 5th one.
Sure.
All right. So tell us about that. You've got a minute.
This one I really love just simply because it was so matter of fact. The hippie he just loves to dance. And I was at a art and soul festival, and so he just would take the hand of various people and dance. And this woman, he was just twirling with her, and I just loved the dress and the fluttering eyelashes and the hairstyle, and then his look as well. And so it just was this soft and matter of fact way of people, a way that, you know, people can exist and do exist.
Right, gotcha. Katie, do you want to ask the question about aging, how it's impacted Renee's artwork? Or I can
Yes, let's do that in our 1 minute here.
Okay.
Renee, perhaps you could tell us a little bit about how growing older has affected your creativity. Are you as creative now as you ever were, or?
Well, because of the pandemic, I have to say yes. I mean, you know, I've taken a lot of Zoom classes, drawing, writing, and painting. Um, I made a coffee table, built a coffee table. Um, I got a bike, a new bike that is rather unusual because it's a walking bike. It's, if you imagine a treadmill on wheels within. So the way that that's opened me up to creativity, it's mostly because I'm more, even though I have a lot of limitations with some physical issues, I feel more free to try new things and just, you know, go for it.
I love that. Thank you. Well, and thank you both for being with us today, sharing and guiding the conversation so beautifully. Renee, I put your webpage up in the chat so people who said, I want to see more of this work can go find Renee at her website, sreneejones.biz, and see more of this beautiful black and white photography amongst others. And I want to echo one of the comments that came in, said, about you, Renee, what a beautiful way to reflect about identity and how identity and roles shift with time. So you've done a great job of that. And Jeremy, thank you for guiding us today. And for folks who want to hit up a little more info on you and your current project, I'm going to put theconnectory.com in our chat. Jeremy, give us a 1-sentence blurb about what the Connectory is.
Sure. It's I met Katie because I am doing a podcast with my partner on loneliness. And obviously everyone's talking about loneliness during these terrible times we're in, but we started it and started to plan it before the pandemic. And of course, once the vaccine's in everyone's arms and so forth, and loneliness is not the hot subject, it's going to be every bit as much an important, fascinating, terrible situation after the pandemic as it is during. So if you're interested in an optimistic and practical solution-based approach to loneliness, maybe you'd like to go to theconnectory.com and sign up for the podcast. And if not, I wish you all much social connection.
Thank you, Jeremy, and thank you, Renee. Have a good one.